Class is in session. Hey guys, welcome to Unlearn 16. Class is in session today. Today, I came all the way down to Queen's Park with
Marit Stiles.
You know, she said her name because nobody can say her name properly, so she jumped in and said it right. You know what? It's one syllable.
I know.
Marit.
Yeah,
But
well,
I think it's two syllables.
it is two syllables. Marit.
But you don't say it like that.
I know, I say Marit.
All right. We're going to walk around Queen's Park. I'm going to give you I'm going to sneak into all the places I'm not supposed to be.
Oh, God, okay.
And we're going to talk about politics. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right,
do
let's
it.
go. Oh, before we leave, she has to sign something. I think this is a big part of her job. You guys are seeing politics in action right now. Whew.
Okay, all right.
Is that what you needed?
Thank God.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were trying to decide how we're going to film this as we're walking through, and I want to hold it like this, but Marit's people are like super, super lovely. They're like, we can hold it and film you guys as you walk, and I'm like, I don't want to do that because my nose is crooked.
And I mean, these are the things. These are the things we have to worry about. These are the priorities.
Look, if you don't look good on camera, who's going to believe you?
Yeah.
If the one thing I've learned, I kind of need to talk about the separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Like what? First of all,
There's a lot
and why is there a dog? I don't think this guy was in this picture originally. What do you think? What do you think about the separate? And this is a legitimate question, actually. This is funny.
Yeah, yeah.
But what do you think legitimately about how we have done in this country, in this province, for the actual separation of church and state? Because we're one of the last provinces to still fund Catholic schools.
That is true. And, you know, even here at the legislature, we say the Lord's Prayer. You know?
What?
Yeah. And it was brought back, I think, under the Conservatives. But look, you know what? Honestly, like, I know that the speaker here, he also does a really good job of trying to bring in other faiths and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, I would say, like, I would put it this way. I think there's respect for faith here. But yeah, I mean,
You
things
say
like
the
this,
Lord's
images like this
Prayer.
are. Yeah.
When do you say the Lord's Prayer?
The first Monday, I think the first Monday of every month, but we might actually do it more often. Yeah, we also sing
Guys,
O
I'm
Canada,
baffled.
and then we also sing God Save the King.
Okay, oh Canada,
Which I guess makes
fine.
more sense, right?
Nobody wants to talk about the king. Bygones.
No, Doug Ford. does.
But I never knew that the Lord's Prayer was ever said here. I'm going to stand firmly opposed to that, but I'm going to go you one step further. Catholic schools.
Catholic schools exist, and there's some historical reasons for that, and
But only 3 provinces, I think, in Canada still do that.
maybe. I mean, I know I grew up in Newfoundland, and we had, I think, when I was growing up, we had 7 school boards because representing different faiths, including an amalgamated province.
Well, that's different. Listen, I've often said if we're going to have any sort of religious funding, right? You got to do it across the board, or you shouldn't do any.
Oh, you're going down a road we can't
That's
go
a
there.
fun road, though.
But you know what? It is interesting because, like I said, when I was growing up, you know, we had a lot of different faith groups represented in those school boards in Newfoundland,
Right.
and then it was when there was this abuse that happened that kind of turned things upside down and shook it, and there was the premier there held a referendum which ended that education
in that province.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're gonna push for a referendum in Ontario. Tell me what you guys think.
I am definitely not saying that.
I'm saying it right here. I'm gonna get her to sign something later. Okay, I'm gonna need to know why so many old pictures.
Yes. So, as I understand it, a lot of these were donated by somebody many, many years ago, donated a whole collection, and they're all reproductions of like old masters, European pictures, so they're not even real. And I can tell you, honestly, like there's a ton of more contemporary art and diverse art in the archive of the Ontario government that, you know, you'll see in some places, but some of us would like to see a little of that more maybe represented here.
I mean, I just don't. I honestly
You're going to
believe
need a different premier for that. I'm just saying.
Where are the good snacks?
The good snacks are in the press gallery.
I don't have a cookie. I don't have a cake. I don't have any. Let's go.
Come here, I'll show you.
Oh, okay. Well, here's a brownie and a Big Daddy cookie. Ooh, Mars bar. Guys, I think we found the prettiest place in Queen's Park. Stand by.
There's a lot of lights in this.
It's so nice.
They do a good job.
we still could talk about separation of church and state, but nonetheless. Oh,
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
this
yeah,
art.
yeah.
This is, look at that.
Contemporary.
That's
Carl
incredible.
Carl Bean.
That is beautiful. Guys, this is the art to come see right here. That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could, they're breaking Christmas trees over there. If you, one thing on your agenda, you get elected tomorrow. Bye, Doug. You get elected tomorrow. What's the number one on your agenda?
We're gonna start building homes, like affordable homes for people.
Can you explain something to me?
Yeah.
Everybody's passing the buck on homes and affordable homes and whose fault it is and who did it. First of all, I did a bit of a digging. From what I found, Brian Mulroney, federally, in like the 80s, such a lovely generation, the 80s. From what I read, he privatized government subsidies or building federally subsidized homes.
Okay, so what I know is that up until actually like the mid 90s, federal and provincial governments were still building some of that non-profit affordable homes.
Okay, so both provincial and federal governments would throw in money for that?
Yeah, and they had different programs. And so like a lot of the co-ops that you see and rent geared to income units and things like that were built in that era, right? They're all built back before the mid 90s. And then around the early 90s, I think the feds canceled it. And then after that, Mike Harris came in and canceled it here in Ontario.
Right.
But you don't know something interesting? We are the only province that doesn't currently have a program like that. We don't have it. We don't do it. We don't build it. We just rely entirely on the private sector, which I mean is bananas. No wonder we don't have affordable housing, right? Because they have
Why
to
would
make
they?
a profit,
They wouldn't.
right?
Yeah, I mean, there's
It's not their
no.
business.
Not only is there no impetus for private companies to make affordable housing, it's actually. I would expect it's counter to their mandate. If I have a corporation, especially if it's publicly traded, my mandate is to make a profit. If I start being nice, I'll get sued by my shareholders. So literally, the only people that can be in this game to be doing this job has to be the government. Has to be.
I mean, I think there are some developers who do some really interesting stuff and who are interested in building, a mixture of different kinds of housing and stuff like that. There's definitely some folks like Daniel's Spectrum. There's some really interesting stuff, but. Generally, no. I mean, you have to make a profit, right? And that's why building isn't happening right now. It's not happening because A, it's still too hard, B, it's too expensive, and C, they just can't sell them at the rate for the price they want. It's not really worth it to them. So right now, in the province of Ontario, affordable housing is not getting built, and the only way you're going to get it built anywhere is, and guarantee it, is to have a provincial agency that works with nonprofits and municipalities and stuff and actually builds those homes and finances it and provides say provincial land, right? There's lots of ways to get it done. And I meet people all the time who already have a plan ready to go and they just have no way to fund it. So let's do it. Let's just get it going.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the hard question. How much?
Oh my God. Well,
that's what they want to know. They want to know, are my taxes going to go up? How much are they going to go up? And I'm so exhausted hearing anybody ever say, don't worry, I'm going to either A, cut your taxes and you're going to get the same services, or I'm going to keep them the same and nothing's going to change. But that's also, I don't think that that's realistic.
That's not realistic because you have to have revenue, right? So, but it's really, who are you taxing? Are you taxing the wealthiest people at a higher rate? If you do that, you can actually pay for a lot more, and maybe folks who earn less aren't going to have to contribute that as much. And there's other things we can do, like just talking generally about taxes and fees and stuff. Like we're saying, hey, the provincial government should pick up a bigger portion of the bill for things like transit and infrastructure with cities and towns and municipalities. And then if we have that kind of thing, we can negotiate with them then, like quid pro quo, like let's reduce some of the fees that you pay for certain things, right? Let's reduce some of those additional costs that you have in communities. It's another way for government to pick up the bill for that. And you know what? I'm gonna just say it. We are paying right now for all kinds of crap that nobody asked for. Vanity spa project with the premiers in downtown Toronto, right? I mean, we are
What's the cost on that, by the way?
$2.2 billion right now, and it's gonna go up. And that's a 99-year lease. And you know what? I did the math, and it's $400 per household in Ontario. $400. So you are paying for that. And that's what I like to tell people is you are already paying for that. What if we took that money and we said, you know what, we're going to start to build homes that people could afford. And it's going to pay for itself. It's going to pay for itself because people are going to be doing better. It's going to cost us less in the end. You know, I'm going to say, and I know you're going to get tired of this, but we pay so much more for people who being homeless. You know, like think about it. Because then they're ending up in hospitals and it's expensive. It's so expensive. You know, those things, hospitals.
You know what the
really
problem,
expensive.
you're 100% right, but the problem is that nobody's put a number to that and a clear number. So if I say, if we actually created reasonable living structures, we took people off the streets, we gave them access, we gave them education, we gave them all those things. If I talk about all that, that's a clear number. On the flip side, it's not clear when you say, okay, what happens when that person gets sick? What happens when crime is committed? What happens when that person gets arrested? All of those costs kind of get lost in the fray. And I feel like if we could somehow really nail those down, it would make sense, a lot more sense than, let's say, the Conservative Party saying, well, this is how much a homeless person, like what did Doug Ford just say? He just said,
he's gonna
get a
fine
job or I'm
people.
going to fine homeless people.
Yeah, and you know what, like, you know who's done that though, and you can put this in your video afterwards, is Andrew Buzari. He's this doctor and he's really into like housing stuff, and he's done all the math and figured out, you know, what it costs for somebody to be a day in a hospital, a day in a shelter, all that. But you know what, like a lot of these things, like rent, guaranteed income, co-op housing and stuff, it pays, people are not paying. They're paying rent, they're paying fees.
You just don't get it.
It's, you know what, at the end of the day, it pays for itself. But I will tell you, yeah, government should be investing in those things. And government should be investing in the basic stuff, right? Healthcare, schools, housing. These are the basics. And then people shouldn't have to worry about that their tax dollars are going into doing the things that are going to matter the most to them. You know, you shouldn't have to worry every day about those basic things, right? You should know that your government's taking care of that.
Can we go in the legislature now?
No.
All right, well, this is nice lighting.
I
think, let's
stairs
just get,
behind
this
us.
is nice. It's like very high school. So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit because a lot of people who speak about the NDP or speak about the left will say that you guys want big government, that you guys want more bureaucracy. Everybody hates that word. First of all, nobody understands what bureaucracy is. Second of all, they think it's very expensive. It gums up working and it gums up being efficient. I think a lot of the times people confuse efficiency with a skeleton crew, and a skeleton crew doesn't necessarily make you efficient. Right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to things like let's say building projects and taking it out of the private sector, how are we supposed to talk about big government and how much it's going to cost?
Okay, well, first of all, you're right. Like, and this is a narrative that the conservatives, the right wing, have been using for years and years and years about the left or the NDP or whatever. And the funny thing about it, I will start by saying is, you know, Doug Ford and the Conservatives here in Ontario have the biggest government of any government ever, like the biggest cabinet. They have more ministers than ever in the history of Ontario. So first of all, that...
And they all get paid more?
And they all get paid more, and they have loads of staff and stuff, so it's like a lot of money that goes into the politicians that head up the government. But you know, like, what is government? It is, so I will say this, NDP governments all across the province have actually been the most fiscally responsible governments. Like, we balance our budgets, we've got a very good record on that, so that's just baloney from the Conservatives. But the other piece of it is, like, your question about, you know, how do you make government, like, how do government doing things in a government program save money? Because, and it's not always the right thing to do, right? Like, sometimes the private sector can do a better job of certain things. But I can tell you, like in healthcare, for example, what you don't want is to be making cuts to programs and care and stuff so that somebody makes a profit. And when we see like long-term care, like during the, like they made a mess of it during COVID, right? Because they were more worried about like making a profit still, because that's kind of what they have to do, instead of actually caring for people. And in fact, what we find over and over and over again is that we can do some things like healthcare, education, stuff generally more efficiently through the government. But like, what is the bureaucracy? It's the people who work, you know, like driving your bus, all the government services that are out there that we depend on. That's what that is. And these guys, and they talk a lot about it, but they've got one of the most inefficient governments that I think has ever existed in the province of Ontario. They're spending more money and delivering less for people than we have seen in generations.
And all they need to do to sell that is say, don't worry, I'm going to give you back your license plate sticker.
Apparently it works. But you know what? I don't think so for very long, because I think a lot of people, they look at they're going to be thinking over the holidays, people get together with their family and they'll be like, everybody's going to be complaining about the cost of food, the cost of everything, rent is through the roof. I can't, my kid can't get support in school. I'm on a wait list for a family doctor for 4 years, right? Everybody's complaining about this stuff. That is on the Ford Conservative government, right? That's on the government in power right now. They have to take responsibility for that.
Okay, we're gonna walk down the stairs while filming. Guys, this is a real testament right here. Let's talk about, we're in the middle of probably one of the states and us are in one of the most chaotic times, I think. Well, I don't know if I've ever seen. I think I've seen a lot of chaos. But it's crumbling, right? You have the Liberals being potentially forced out of government. You have Jagmeet Singh basically saying, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? You think this is time? You think the non-confidence vote should go through and we should force an election?
I think that what we got right now is what they call a minority government. So they don't have a majority of the seats. So they really, those kinds of governments, they don't last forever, right? That's the reality. And while I'm not very happy about what I think the outcome of the election is going to be in Canada, I think people are fed up. I keep hearing from people is people are so done. And one of the things I was thinking about this morning was, I think people are generally, what I hear from people is they are so sick and tired of politicians, leaders, governments that care more about holding on to power than they do about actually doing things for people. And that's how it seems to people.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's always true, but I understand that. Things are getting really bad right now. And it's just holding on to power for power's sake is not good enough. It's just not good enough. It really isn't.
But again, on the flip side, as we had this conversation a little bit before, on the flip side, part of me understands. It's you see the polling numbers, you know that Polyev is, in the position that he is in, and however he got there. And the idea of okay, well, if they want to force an election, you have a non-confidence vote, but the notion that we can see the writing on the wall about the next government that's going to take place and the lies that are being told, it's funny because you're being much more democratic about it, where I feel like I might lean the other way.
Yeah. Well, I guess I look at it this way. Every government would hang on to power, I think, not every government, but a lot of
as long as you can.
Hold on, as long as they possibly can. They're making good money. They've got the biggest cabinet in Canadian history here in Ontario.
Right.
They're doing great, and they never go to an election. But the truth is, there's an end date, and sometimes you got to pull the plug. And I will also say, Joe, and this is I hope, but anything can happen during an election. Things can shift. The NDP in Saskatchewan went up, I think, 25 points.
Yeah, they did.
In the course of a few weeks of an election. So things can change, and you know what? People's attention shifts, right?
And I think people feel very out of control.
Yeah.
And I think an election, even though it's a little bit of a pretense, but it gives a little bit of a glimpse of having control over what your future is. And even though I might disagree with the choice. Yeah. That's the point of a democracy, is in order to make it, make sure that you have that consistently.
Yeah.
All right, so federally, the NDP, because the Liberals were in a minority position, the NDP have had this incredible power federally in order to push their agenda, right? Yeah. Dental care.
That drives the Conservatives crazy.
Well, of course it does. They call it a coalition, and they call it backroom deal. It's not backroom, guys. Yeah. They're talking about it in full view.
It's actually kind of a cool thing, right?
I think that's the way I usually appreciate a minority government actually better, because what it does is it lends itself to being moderately rational, no matter who's forming it, right? Because they need to make concessions with other political parties. And I think the concessions with other political parties is what is it's way more democratic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What do you think about an elected Senate?
Oh, well, okay, first of all, I do not believe in an unelected Senate. I'm not even sure I really have a lot of confidence in the need for a Senate, but I would definitely prefer a elected Senate to an unelected appointed Senate.
I like you're like, I don't know if I even like a Senate.
Well, I mean, you know, we at the provincial level, we don't have a Senate. I will say, I do think that sometimes the senators here in Canada have been like, they call it like sober second thought, right? It's like an opportunity to say, okay, this government wants to do this wild thing. We're going to take it away for a minute, give it a little more thought, think it through a little better.
They
It's
often
not bad.
just like rubber stamp.
But a lot of time they've been rubber stamping it, and that's because it's often appointed. So I think the elected Senate's a lot smarter. But you know, on this thing about the agreement that they had, you're right. Like that's way more democratic. And actually, some of the biggest changes and most important changes in Canadian history have happened as a result of those minority governments, because they had to kind of get together different perspectives and negotiate things. And actually, like a dental program, like I'm already meeting a lot of people who are benefiting from that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a pretty big deal. It's a big change for a lot of people.
Can we go in the legislature?
No.
Proportional representation or ranked ballots?
Proportional representation. But I don't mind a ranked ballot.
Just provincially or nationally?
Both. But I think ranked ballot can work really well at like a municipal level. My personal perspective.
Interesting. So let's say, for those who don't know, so a ranked ballot would mean this. Whatever political parties are on the ballot, you don't just go in and vote for whoever you want to win. You actually rank them first through whatever, right? And what ends up happening is those get averaged out. So the person that's going to actually win will have the most favorable ranking. It'll be some mathematical problem that I don't want to do. It'll be a most favorable ranking. Now, here's my problem with proportional. All of a sudden you have 24 parties.
Maybe. And you definitely have a lot of different voices. So like for some people, they might say, oh, you know, I really don't want all those people that are too far left or too far right to have representation. But you know what? Like, I gotta say, like, I think we benefit from having a diversity of voices. And I think you're still in Canada, like we have a pretty, you know, I don't think we're gonna have as much of a problem with that, but like, I like the idea of having different voices, and I like people feeling like their vote matters, which is so important, right? Like, you know, in my riding, there's always, you know, there's people who vote green, and they can't elect a green member in my riding, right? They're elected a few, but they would have a chance to have probably more people elected.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I think that would
and have
be,
more voices heard.
Yeah.
We're going to have to talk about the legislature because I don't think any voice gets heard.
No.
All right, right behind me, guys, we have the legislature.
Yeah,
We're
that's
going in
the
though,
chamber.
right? Let's
No.
go. What do you mean, no? I'm just going to... Shouldn't be locked to the people. Here's what we really have to talk about. What goes on... I know you're not going to let me in there, but...
It's really not up to me.
What goes on in Parliament, like in the House? The fighting, the banging on the desk. I'm not going to lie to you. It looks like grade 9.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I don't understand, and I feel as though we should have a major shift in the way in which those debates happen. Because number one, I'm tired of hearing cheers and boos and whatever. It's exhausting.
It's kind of like team sports, right?
It's stupid. Just paint your face and get it over with. But it doesn't. It doesn't encourage anybody to think that there's serious work being done in the I really don't. I think it's one of the worst. It's like if you're going to think about advertising or propaganda or I didn't mean propaganda. That just lived out. Or but branding. It's a and this is true provincially and federally, right?
Yeah,
they
hurts
throw
the brand.
Barbs back and forth.
The democracy brand.
It really does because
Yeah.
it's like, what are these people doing?
Yeah. We often talk about the fact that you'll see we'll be sitting in the chamber down here in our seats, and you'll see like a grade 4 class come in, right? And they come in and they sit in there,
would be embarrassed.
right? And they come in and they come in and they're all like happy and excited, and they sit down and they're in there for a few minutes and their faces just drop. And it's terrible. But you know, I would say like most of what I would call like the theater of it happens during question period at the beginning of the day, and then there's all these debates that happen later on which are a little bit different. And I think frankly most people are just aren't watching that part of it. Yeah.
Right. So we need to figure out how to get well, two things. Question period should be questions, rational questions, not sarcastic,
well, but at a certain point, if you're not getting the answer over and over, like I get exasperated.
Sure,
right?
absolutely, but shouldn't that be the speaker's job?
Yeah, and I think
Whoa,
the speaker.
whoa, you didn't answer the question, sir.
Yeah, no. But
Ma'am?
you see, the thing about it is, you see, they call it question period for a reason. It's not question and answer period.
Oh, right. The banging on the desks. Honest to God,
where that comes from.
I teach grade 10s, and that jeering that goes back and forth. I don't get it. I don't think it serves anything at all. And I don't understand why everybody talks about decorum and you talk to the speaker. For those who don't know Canadian politics, you don't speak directly to the individual.
Yeah.
That's supposed to stop them from acting a fool. But so you're supposed to speak to the speaker and this,
and it's supposed to keep it, but it's like if you're in a meeting and you're talking through a chair, and the reason you talk through the chair, so you'd say through you, speaker, to the members opposite, blah, blah, blah. But the reason you do it is it's supposed to take it a bit off of the sort of personal attack. It's supposed to be less like you. And so when Doug Ford, for example, says, I'm going to come in after you in the legislature to me, he gets in trouble for that, right? He's not allowed to directly go after me. He has to go through the chair, and that is supposed to keep it a little less personal.
What if, just throwing it out here, because again, we lose everything in that context.
Yeah.
If it's a majority government, let's be quite honest, doesn't matter.
That's true.
That doesn't matter.
Well, I don't know about that. Because I think that for the government, for example, when we're asking them questions and exposing certain issues that are going on, whether it's we talk about somebody who showed up at an emergency room and it was closed because the government's not funding healthcare appropriately. When we tell those stories and we bring them up in the legislature and we ask the government to answer for that, they don't have to give us an actual answer, but they have to respond. They have to respond. And so when they stand up, somebody has to speak for that. And I think holding them to account, that's why we have question period. But the drama, a lot of that goes back to sort of parliamentary tradition. Look at the UK and how it is there. And I believe me, I don't even know why.
Ridiculous.
Half of it, I don't even know why it is like that. The banging of the tables. We do that for specific things. When there's a certain kind of vote, that's how we do it. But I don't know where that tradition comes from. I have no idea.
I just don't think it goes any. Honest to God, I'm at a point.
I agree.
I'm at a point where I'm okay, cool. We're going to talk about funding healthcare. You kind of want it to be like this.
Yeah.
Could you send a representative up here? You send a representative up here.
Yeah.
You're going to sit down.
Yeah.
We're going to put a camera on you.
Yeah.
And you're going to actually talk about the issue. I just think we're so
I
far
agree.
removed from something legitimate happening. Could you imagine how much would get done? And it doesn't matter who it is, but if you were sitting across from Doug and you said, listen, this emerge was closed, right? This emerge, I've seen the list of emergency rooms that have been closed in Ontario, which is a nightmare. What do we do about this? And really sit there very calmly. Nobody needs to yell. Nobody needs to whatever. And the only thing I can think of, the only kind of person that doesn't want that discussion is the person that doesn't know, doesn't care, and doesn't want to give a legitimate answer.
Yeah, true. And I think part of it goes back to your question about different ways of electing governments, right? Different electoral systems that exist in many other parts of the world. If we didn't have the system we have, our system kind of requires everybody to be kind of very partisan, very divided. You
have a party
better.
whip, yeah. So
you can do better. We could all do better. And I totally agree. In fact, one of the things we always are pushing for is things like more time for committee meetings. So they bring a piece of legislation to a committee. And again, it can be very partisan, the back and forth, because the government, when they have a majority, they have no real interest often in actually hearing from anybody else.
Right.
But you know what? That has changed a lot. It wasn't always like that. When I was much younger, I worked not in this building, but for somebody years and years ago, and it was totally different. The politicians actually would sit down in committees and they would work through issues. One party might say, I have a problem with this part of that bill, that law, and then they'd try to work on some things. and that has gone out the window. And it's really, honestly, it started under Mike Harris here in Ontario, and it federally, Stephen Harper, the Conservatives, I will say, started it, but it wasn't just them. Every party has kind of, I think, chipped away at some of that over the years.
Do you think it shifted?
Yeah.
Do you think it shifted because of television and social media?
Oh, I think that has really changed things recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like, certainly you're playing to the camera. And in social media, it changes. Yeah, it's fast. It's you look at some of the way that like some of the politicians, say somebody in Ottawa that you may not like as much, who gets up, and I don't either, and the way
he eats a lot of apples.
Yeah, and he plays to that, right?
Yep.
It's like little sound bites and stuff. So I think it's a lot less about actually making a good point or having a real conversation or making and actually like debating a real issue. But I mean, you know what? I'm going to say again, if you watch actual question period, there are a lot of people who get up, a lot of MPPs who get up, and they ask real questions about real things happening in their communities. And but again,
and we're just not seeing them.
I think that's
I'll
part
tell
of
you
it.
right now, the public's not seeing it.
Yeah.
Unless you're actively going to look for that, you're not seeing that.
Well, but that's also like a good thing, right? Then a good point to make, which is that you should go and you should look up and see, what is my member of provincial parliament asking about in the legislature? What are they actually doing? You know, because I think you find there's a big difference, and I would argue a big difference between parties, but also between different elected officials. Yeah, and their style.
Just stand up. I'm going to look right now. Hold on. Okay, we got to wrap it up. I've been told by security, who's really mad at me for trying to open those doors.
That was
listen,
not a good thing.
It was. It's my house.
It is your house. You know what?
It's my house.
It's
the people's house.
It the house. It is the people's
right?
house.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be an election coming up, right? Are we
Yes.
thinking Ford's going to call one?
Yes. I don't know when, but probably soon.
I'm thinking he doesn't really love what's playing out in the federal government. He's thinking about calling an election here. You have 3 things that you get to talk about. That's it. That's all. Because we just discussed people don't have a good attention span. You got 3 things to talk about. You're going to talk about building adequate health care. I mean,
we got to build homes.
Yes.
We got to make life easier. We have to find people family doctors, and we need to make life just more affordable for people.
Okay, family doctors. What's your strategy?
Oh, we're going to connect people to family health teams and community health centers. We're going to reduce the administrative burden on doctors so that they can see more patients. But you know what? It's going to have to be, like, for me, that's like my 100-day strategy, is to start to connect more people with actual primary care, family doctors. It's huge. It's going to save us a lot of money, and it's going to put...
It will.
It
will save a lot of money. Nobody understands that.
No, it's going to save so much money, and it's going to take a lot of pressure off our emergency rooms, which are overwhelmed right now.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'm just going to try to get in the legislature again. One more. Dismissed.